As Africans, we are always complaining about how colonization affected us, how it destroyed our countries, our continent. This is true to some point. There have been some lasting effects of colonization. But at the same time, I find it so interesting that there are so many Africans who are keeping colonization alive. And actually not by force, but by choice, by daily choices that have actually become normal. That's why it's really important for all of us as Africans to come together, look at how we are holding our own continent back without blaming other people, without waiting for a savior. One of the things that I've always noticed, and more so after studying communication and marketing at higher level, what I've noticed is that a lot of Africans have an inferiority complex. It's internalized inferiority that is perpetuated at all levels, from the homes to countrywide institutions. And it is this internalized inferiority that is making a lot of Africans promote colonization. Right now, what we're experiencing is that Africans are just colonizing themselves using the ideas that the West introduced to Africa. One of the ways we see this is beating children. Now, I know a lot of parents and teachers will always say that, oh, children need to be beaten because they need to be disciplined. But you know what? If you need to beat your child in order to discipline them, in order to show them that something is wrong, it means that you're just an immature person and you shouldn't be having children in the first place. What happened to speaking? It's always baffling to me that a lot of people are not able to see the correlation between parents and teachers beating children and police brutality, because at the end of the day, it's not about discipline, it's about subjugating people, it's about obedience. Parents and teachers want to control children the same way the state wants to control its citizens. It's nothing to do with discipline. This is what the colonizers used to put Africans in their place. And this is the same thing that Africans are using to put other Africans in place. Because at the end of the day, as an African, you're not supposed to be hard. You're just supposed to be seen. You're not supposed to be creative. You're not supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to be subjugated. You're supposed to just follow rules. This is what a lot of African parents and teachers are actually promoting when they beat their children. And on a state level, this becomes police brutality. And so we cannot continue blaming colonization for our problems when we are also perpetuating our own colonization. And going hand in hand with this idea of obedience, it also comes in the form of wearing uniforms in school, forcing children to shave their heads. Because you know what? African hair, it's too difficult. It's going to make children stupid. And yes, this is something we used to be told in school, and we were forced to shave our heads, especially in primary school. My goodness. Is the banning of African attire in professional spaces, because apparently if you wear anything that looks African or too African, you're not professional enough. This is happening in African countries. Why do we have lawyers who are still wearing white wigs? This is how the colonizers wanted to subjugate African, because of course the systems of power that we have were inherited from the colonial masters. They've never really been changed, so we're just colonizing ourselves. It's majorly because a lot of people have this internalized inferiority, and it just goes everywhere. Another example is the glorification of light skins. This has led to an outbreak of people bleaching their skins because they do not want to have darker skin tones. A lot of Africans are showing their inferiority complex. They hate themselves so much because they want to be like the white man. And so you're finding that a lot of people are going out of their way and bullying people that have darker skin tones. I always see it in a lot of comment sections of influencers that have darker skin tones. They're being told you're not beautiful, no one will want to marry you. People are just so crass about it. And this bullying is not just something that happens on social media. It even starts in the homes. You always see that when you have siblings who have different skin tones, they're always being treated differently, and the one that has darker skin tone is going to be treated much worse than the one who has a lighter skin tone. This also happens in schools. It also affects job opportunities. This is a whole systemic issue, and it just makes you wonder, why are you punishing people for having darker skin tones, and yet that is the majority makeup of what we have in a lot of African countries. It's a continental problem, and unfortunately a lot of people do not really want to get to the bottom of it, which is the inferiority complex, the self-hate. But you know what? We are not going to move forward if we don't deal with these issues, because there is no way Africa is conquering the world when you yourself, you don't even like who you are. And then we have tribalism, which is an inside fight, and then we have xenophobia, which is a fight between different African countries. The colonizer used the divide and conquer tactics in order to win against Africans, because they knew that if all the tribes in a country came together, they would be able to defeat the colonial powers. But they were not doing this from scratch because they were just using the animosities that already existed between different tribes. They just made that much bigger. Even until 2025, there are so many people that are so tribal. There's so many people who think that someone from a certain tribe shouldn't be in a position of power, shouldn't get access to equal opportunities, or even if you do something wrong, all of a sudden people start saying, oh, you're doing that because you come from this tribe. And then on a continental level, it's this xenophobia where people are like, people from this country are taking all the opportunities when they come to this country. And at the end of the day, we're really not helping ourselves, because the only thing that we actually need for the continent of Africa to prosper is the unity of all Africans. The lack of unity is what is promoting the dependence on the West, on loans and other cannibalistic partnerships. I've recently had, I think it's an African proverb, I don't know where it comes from, but it says something like, when two brothers are fighting, it's the stranger that gets to eat. And this is exactly what is happening. There are some African businesses who also look down on African people, most especially in the tourism industry. They think that, oh, the white people, they're the ones who are richer, they're the ones who will keep you well. Of course, in 2025, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Another way in which a lot of Africans promote colonization is blaming colonization for the problems that we have, because this is reinforcing this colonial idea that Africans are stupid, that Africans cannot lead themselves. Right now, honestly, we are stuck in this cycle of people just blaming colonization, and no one really wants to look at themselves. A lot of people do not want to take responsibility for how they're also contributing to the world that we have here. I was doing a little bit of research about the fabric of a lot of Kenyans, and I came across this news articles where it was actually highlighting how normal Kenyans also engage in corruption and stealing. And I found this very funny, because a lot of the times when we speak about Kenyan problems, people just want to point the finger at the leaders. They're the ones who are corrupt. But if we're being honest, corruption is something that affects every aspect of our lives. That's why you're seeing news articles of Kenyans who are also stealing from their own employers, who do not want to pay their own employees. So at the end of the day, instead of just continuously blaming other people for the problems that we have, we need to be honest with ourselves and start looking inward. How are we also contributing to these systems that are not working for us? If we cannot do that, then we are just reinforcing this idea that we actually cannot take responsibility for ourselves, and we need a white savior to actually come and lead us. We can talk about how colonization set up these oppressive systems, but we cannot keep on blaming colonization for us upholding the systems. Colonization is not forcing your leaders to steal your taxes. Colonization is not forcing you to steal from your employer. I also find that this idea that many Africans have, that the West is the ideal, it's the heaven, also promotes colonization, because it is reinforcing this idea that Africa has nothing. Africa is not the continent to be. You're someone like me who went abroad and then came back to their continent, you're called a failure because you were not able to stay abroad. A lot of people over-glorify this idea of going to the West, going abroad, and yet a lot of them are just going there to become slaves. And that is actually not an exaggeration. The day that majority of Africans will understand that no one is coming to save us, and it is upon us to reform our own continent and to make our own continent the giant that we want it to be without relying on other people, is the day that we are actually going to move forward. And as much as I'm saying this, as a woman who has grown up in the African continent, which is deeply patriarchal, I will also be the same one to tell a lot of African women, go where your worth is going to be appreciated. Because the honest thing is that as an African woman, in a lot of these Western countries, you're going to be able to do a lot of things with your life that you wouldn't be able to do in a lot of your own African country, because you're always being forced to reduce yourself to become this woman that is not better than a man. It is really difficult for you to succeed without a lot of useless challenges as an African woman if you're ambitious, smart, and unmarried. Your society, your own family, the institutions, they are going to come up with all kinds of hurdles for you to show you that you're not good enough, because how dare you think that you can be better than a man. So as much as I'm saying that yes, we need to invest in our own continent, as a woman who has grown up in a deeply patriarchal society, I say unless we all work towards dismantling the patriarchy, I would rather go where my worth is seen than struggle in a continent, in a country that doesn't see my humanity, that doesn't want to see me as a human being. And you know what? The continent is never ever going to go forward without women being respected as human beings. So yeah, as much as we want to see a better continent, we also have to really all work to dismantle the patriarchy, because as I said in a previous video, when you look at majority of the problems that we have in Kenya and even in Africa as a whole, they all stem from patriarchy. And whether you want to accept that or not, it is the truth. And many times when I speak about African issues, one of the comments that never ceases is this idea, oh, why are you speaking the colonizer's language? I find this to be deeply hypocritical, and it's also something that reinforces this colonial idea that our languages are inferior. Constantly pointing out that, oh, speaking English is wrong, speaking French is wrong, should be elevating our African languages. It just goes to show that a lot of people consciously think that our languages are inferior. That's why they are always trying to do these comparisons. And yet at the same time, the people who are doing these comparisons, the people who are saying that speaking in these colonial languages is bad, they're actually not doing anything to preserve these African languages that they say they are so proud of. I find it so baffling that a lot of Africans think that they just have to do nothing. They don't have to put in a lot of effort into ensuring that our culture remains. If you want people to see value in your language, you need to show people that you actually value your language. People that have a problem with us speaking English, they're not going out of their way to create a curriculum that will preserve these African languages. They're not starting schools to teach people these African languages. When you look at a language like English, a lot of people in the world now speak English because English were very clear that they wanted their language to go to different parts of the world, and so they even set up a curriculum. They made it easier for people to access how to learn English. Right now, if you go to many universities all over the world, you can do a major in English, major in French, major in Korean language, in Chinese. But how many African languages are doing that? There is no way you want people to be speaking African languages, but there's no one who is putting in time, effort, resources, money into promoting these African languages. And the people who are always saying that, oh, we are losing our African languages, are waiting for some savior that is going to save us. And really, it is very true that a lot of Africans are actually not interested in preserving these languages or even African culture. Because again, and we go back to all these examples I've given, there's a lot of internalized inferiority. And there's so many parents that actually don't teach these African languages to their children. In fact, one of the things that I constantly see and I find to be funny, when there is some sort of misunderstanding between Kenya and Tanzania, a lot of Kenyans will start making fun of Tanzanians for learning all their languages in Kiswahili. So you think you're better because as a Kenyan, you learned in English. Again, there's internalized inferiority. As much as a lot of people want to tell you, oh, why are you speaking English? You're just promoting colonization. They're the same people that will respect you because you speak English like the white person, because you speak English with an accent, because you learned biology and physics in English. So let's just stop with this pretense. You know what I find the most fascinating is that Harvard University in the United States teaches more African languages than many African universities. I know in some Kenyan universities you can learn Kiswahili, but how many of them are teaching Zulu or Igbo? And on top of this, we need to talk about where are the opportunities for people who are learning these African languages, because let's be honest, a lot of people would be encouraged to learn these languages if there was actually an opportunity for them. After all, we live in a capitalistic society. The reason why a lot of people are learning languages like English is because they know there are opportunities. So yes, these colonial languages, they're giving people more opportunities. So we really need to stop being hypocrites as Africans, think that our languages are inferior, but we also want to police each other about how we are speaking these colonial languages. Yet at the same time, we are really not doing anything to give value to these African languages. We're not doing anything to promote them. We're not seeing our own governments investing time, resources, money into marketing these languages. Now, I must say that I do agree that we need to promote our culture and preserve our culture at an individual level. I really do not care whether these African languages are preserved. Because it goes back to the fact that a lot of African cultures are patriarchal and a lot of them don't believe in treating women as human beings. So I really do not care about promoting a culture that doesn't see me as a human being. Promoting a language that in turn promotes a culture that doesn't see me as a human being, that is not in my interest. So yes, I do agree that we need to put in a lot of effort into preserving our African culture if we want to. But at the same time, I do not care at an individual level, because a lot of these cultures do not care about me just because I'm a woman. But it goes to show that if we really want to see change in our African continent, we need to look deeply into ourselves, because a lot of the problems that we have right now, they are not being caused by colonization. It is us who are actually perpetuating this problematic and oppressive systems. We need to take accountability for our own continent and what it has become.